Hey friends, it's Jess from Love Jess Co on social media, and I'm super excited to be sharing a layout with you for Archer and Olive in my A5 size notebook. I'm creating a spring garden checklist. Spring is right around the corner, and I can't wait to get back out in the garden. So let's go ahead and see how this layout turns out. Jumping right into our layout, I generally like to do a sketch first with pencil, just so that I am sure that all of the things I want to include are going to fit, and I can move things around to make them look a little bit better. When I kind of just fly by the seat of my pants, sometimes I end up regretting it and wish that I had planned a little bit better, so I do try to get in the habit of planning first and then going through with the pen and the final details. One thing I do want to note about this layout is I made quite a few mistakes, but with the theme being gardening and growth, I really thought it was important to show how we can still keep going and be resilient even when we make mistakes. I know a lot of us planners are perfectionists, but it is really nice to just say, you know what, let's just keep going and not feel like you have to start over or make it absolutely perfect. So I left all of that in the video so that you can see it's not all movie magic. We're not all perfect. And just what we see on social media is not always how it started or how it was going in the middle. Right off the bat with this layout, I had an issue with my stamping on the bear image down towards the bottom. I kind of got a ghosted impression. I was able to cover most of that up with my coloring later on in the video, but try to be careful and precise about where you're putting your stamps. Sometimes it can be hard right on the edge of the notebook like that because you'll have more paper on one side versus the other, and that can make it difficult to get a stamped impression. But sometimes I will lift the book up and kind of press from the back, but you do have to be careful because the stamp can shift, which is what happened in this situation. I then also had an issue with my prune stamp up there at the top with all the different letters. I didn't get quite a good impression when I first stamped it, and then I went to go try to restamp it, and then it was kind of off-centered. So I just went in with a fine liner and kind of went around those letters to darken them up, thicken them up so that you couldn't tell that there was a ghosted sort of impression there. And then later I did straighten up some of those lines with a white gel pen so that it looked a little more uniform. But like I said, don't feel like you have to start over. If you make a mistake, there are plenty of ways to try to fix them and keep going with your layout. So stick with it, and I'm sure your layout will be awesome in the end. After you're done stamping or adding the lines in any particular area, you can go back in with an eraser and get rid of those pencil lines. Just make sure you give your ink time to dry so that you're not smearing the ink while you are trying to erase. There's nothing more frustrating than that. Believe me, I know. But now I'm just going in with a thicker fine liner and adding some details like these straight lines with the little dots on the end, just for a little bit of interest and to kind of break up the page a little bit so that it is a little less busy. I do tend to make my layouts a bit busy because I'm trying to use the space the best I can and add as much in as I can. But if you prefer a more minimalist look, you can definitely leave some of the illustrations or things like that out. Also, on the note of illustrations, if you don't have stamps like this, that is okay. I have a lot of stamps because I make greeting cards also, so that is just a supply that I have a lot of. If you don't have stamps, feel free to hand draw your own doodles and add elements in a way that makes sense for you. If you don't like to hand draw, you could also do things like stickers or fun washi tapes in place of some of these, or even print things from the internet, like if you have clip art or something like that, and then just glue it right into your notebook. One thing that I find helps make layouts look a little more interesting and exciting is to switch up the fonts. This applies whether you're using a stamp set or doing the lettering or drawing yourself. You can change the way the letters look just to kind of mix it up a little bit and not have everything looking so uniform and similar. You can see, hopefully up at the top, there's the sketch of the title for the page, but then I've also used the different font stamps for the letters, and then it actually kind of worked out that I made the mistake earlier on, because then the prune letters look different than the mulch letters down at the bottom, so it kind of gives a little added interest as well there. Then I'm kind of mixing and matching some script with some regular print so that it just looks a little more exciting. Another way to add more visual interest to your layouts with the fonts is to use different thickness of pens. So a fine liner that has a thicker line versus a thinner line can really make a big difference. You can also reserve some of those thicker lined pens for your headlines or titles, and then use sort of the body text or list items and things like that with a finer tip, so that you just get that definition between them and it helps break up the page a little bit better. One of my favorite ways to add some striking contrast in my layouts, especially with titles, is to do a black rectangle like you see underneath the title there. And then I go back in later once the ink has completely dried with a white gel pen for the secondary part of the title. So I've got the spring up there at the top, and then I go back in with the gel pen for the checklist portion. And I really like the way that that looks with the white on the black. Just gives you a little bit more difference and contrast, and I personally really like the way that it looks. I did go back in and color in some of the images with my calligraphs. These are a brush marker, and there's a lot of fun colors that you can use from Archer and Olive to do these. I just used a lot of kind of browns and reddish colors and yellows to give that sort of fall leaf mixture. And then I went back in and highlighted the spring title with another calligraph. I did go ahead and color in the bear image, and I did the cat and wheelbarrow as well. So I'll go ahead and let you see how that came together, and then we'll finish off the layout. All right, now that our coloring is done, I'm just adding in some last minute things like the list items under what I can direct sew versus start inside. This will definitely change for everyone depending on what area of the world you're in and what your weather or climate is like. So definitely check and see what grows well for you and when you might need to start those if you're looking to grow things in your garden this year. On the left page, I hate to leave it blank, so I wanted to add a little bit of interest over there. I am a big fan of adding photos into my planner, especially ones that you can just print on computer paper like this. It's super thin, it doesn't make your journal super bulky, and they just look really visually stunning when it takes up that whole page like that. I don't know, there's just something magical about it. So I went ahead and added some adhesive to the back of this after I printed it out and used a corner chomper to round the edge there so that it will line up with the notebook really nicely. And then I'm just adding another bit of adhesive to this other image, which is actually a planting guide from my local cooperative extension. If you have a local cooperative extension, check them out and see if they have a guide like this so that you can figure out what to grow in your area and when. Ours puts out one every single month. And it is really, really helpful for knowing what to plant and what to start inside or transplant. I did add a little bit of text there, so start here and then look at what you are capable of doing. That bottom picture is actually a picture of my garden, one of my favorite plants, the pineapple sage, and some lemongrass that we grew in a previous year, and it's basically goals. So I like to remind myself what can happen if we put in the work at the beginning. All right, I am out in the garden with my notebook, with my spring checklist, so that I can turn this into this.